welcome to A San Francisco Conservative. I'm a longtime journalist. I've worked for ABC News, CBS News, NBC, even covered the White House for a year for the Nightly Business Report. I love having thought-provoking conversations and meeting interesting people, and that's exactly what we do on A San Francisco Conservative. That, in fact, is the title of the second book by my co-host, author David Parker, who's joining us from San Francisco. David's books are Income and Wealth, A San Francisco Conservative, and Rome 476. Hey, David, how are you?
I'm fine, Tom. Nice to see you. How are you doing today, Tom?
I'm doing really well, really well. It's a very stimulating time in the news. You know, I got my start in the news business, I guess it was during the Reagan years in Washington with CBS covering politics. And things are really heating up, whether it's, whether we're going to eliminate some of those Republican candidates. Donald Trump has a very big lead right now, as we know. The Iowa caucuses are coming up very soon. And there is, as we all know, a lot going on in the world that kind of puts so many of us on edge. What are your thoughts about the current political scene, based on especially what you bring to all of us in your books, that historical perspective? I'm used to thinking of the events of the day, but the reason I love your books is because you bring that historical perspective to what's going on.
But if Congress is fighting with each other, one, that's historic. Before the Civil War, they were actually hitting each other. And there've been rough sessions of Congress throughout our history. That's not the end of the world. So you think the nation is falling apart. And the dialogue and how they talk to each other is on a pretty low level. It's right out of Facebook or something. It's social media.
Yeah, I think it was,
the way they talk is not dignified.
I think it was just recently, I forget which congressman challenged a congressional expert witness, said, you want to take this back out in the back alley here and roll up our sleeves. Like, what's going on? I think it was Bernie Sanders says, gentlemen, you're senators, for God's sakes. But it's interesting. I guess that's the level of tension in Congress now, and whatnot is. I love how in so many of your essays that are found in your three great books, you talk about what a precious creation democracy is. And perhaps, I don't know if you mentioned, if you would say it's fragile or it's very durable, but it really does seem like it's being put to the test right now. And I question how effectively, I mean, not that I want an alternative, certainly, but I mean, I heard again on the House floor, someone saying, hey, I'm going back to my constituents soon, and I can't really point to a single bill that we've passed here that I can talk about, to motivate them to vote for me again or something like that. What's your assessment of all this, if we've stayed true to what the founding fathers intended?
I believe what's not being said, but is at the heart of the real left-right split, the red-blue split, the real heart of it all. The founding fathers created a document after 3 months or 4 months of serious thought. Every single day, 100 almost geniuses sat down in a convention and pulled the best ideas from Rome, the best ideas from Greece, Athens, and the best ideas from the Age of Enlightenment, John Locke and etc., Adam Smith, and created a one-page document. 100 geniuses for 30 or 90 days or 120 days created a one-page document that's really a pinnacle document in the history of the world. That's never happened ever in the world. Geniuses got together and created a document for government. There's nothing you can't go forward from that. Progressivism, by definition, we're moving forward from the Constitution, from the founding fathers. And that, I think the nation, a little bit unconsciously, doesn't quite like. That's what's underlying it all. An expansive interpretation of the Constitution, or a literal interpretation of the Constitution. Justice Scalia and a majority now of the Supreme Court says we better go back to a literal interpretation of the Constitution because it's such a good document. Why are we one page? In Europe, their Constitution is called the Maastricht Agreement. It's 254 pages. Nobody knows what it means. Of course, there's room for controversy, but we know what our Constitution means. We're going to elect our Congress, and only Congress can pass laws. not administrative agencies like the environmental and the Department of Education. They don't pass laws. That's not their job. And Congress delegated all their responsibility to the agencies, so they don't have to be on record as having voted for or against something because they may not be reelected. So it's really we're in a bad
Actually,
position.
a new, I definitely hear what you're saying and make a great point there. One new little element that Donald Trump has thrown into the mix, he said that he's going to be proposing healthcare reform. And it seemed to me that Obamacare was working quite well. What do you think?
Before Medicare, which is before affordable health care, the cost of health insurance was about the price of auto insurance or life insurance or property insurance. I just picked up a little piece of property here in California. It's worth, I don't know what it's worth. I won't tell you the deal, but it's worth between 2 or 3 million. And I just put an insurance policy on it, a single family residence, $1,000 a year, $100 a month. Health insurance should cost about $200 a month. That's a million. That's a $2 or $3 million home, $100 a month. Health insurance should be about $200 a month, $50 for a young person because they're healthier. If you're an older person, maybe $300 or $400. That's everybody can afford health insurance, but there's no. The market is gone. Medicare turned health insurance into prepay medical care. You're paying for your everything right now. Everybody's paying between $1,000 and $2,000 a month.
Definitely gotten out of hand. I tell you what, I want to pick up on that and continue that conversation. This is a San Francisco Conservative. I'm Tom Martin, along with my co-host David Parker, and we will continue.
In the heart of the vibrant city by the bay, meet a voice that's challenging the status quo. David Parker, author of A San Francisco Conservative and Rome 476. David Parker, a true San Franciscan with a conservative vision for the future, is a voice that resonates with our nation's founding fathers. Freedom from government, not with government. For 40 years, he taught in San Francisco's inner city schools, acquired a large real estate portfolio, and worked as a professional musician. The Dave Parker Sextet performs every week. It's time for a fresh perspective, one that values fiscal responsibility, individual responsibility. David Parker is not only an academic, his thumb is on the pulse of the economy. He brings real solutions to all the problems affecting our nation. Learn more at davidparkeressays.com and get a free chapter to any of his books, A San Francisco Conservative, Rome 476, and Income and Wealth. That's davidparkeressays.com.
This is a San Francisco Conservative. I'm Tom Martin, a longtime journalist, having worked for ABC News, CBS News, other news organizations, and we're speaking with my co-host, author David Parker, joining us from San Francisco. David is the author of 3 great books, Income and Wealth, A San Francisco Conservative, and the newest one, Rome 476. We'll talk about that in a moment. But David, we were just to recap briefly, we were talking about the extreme cost of some of these executive decisions. And you were talking about President Johnson, and the war on poverty and how that was so costly and completely ineffective. And that kind of inspires me to ask you, what is the proper role of the United States? Right now, there's conflict in Israel and there's conflict in Ukraine. Joe Biden has said we have to take some responsibility for those situations. What are your thoughts?
George Washington's farewell address, as well as Dwight Eisenhower's farewell address. Better be careful about messing around with foreign countries. We're just going to be sucked into their world. Ukraine has an awful history. And all of a sudden is acting like a decent nation. They really are fighting, and they have 2 wars going on. They're fighting the Russians, and they're fighting corruption within the country. They got a long way to go. And if it's going to be a stalemate for years, then we are going to pull out. That's what's going to happen. And Israel, that's not our war. We give foreign aid to Israel, but we also give foreign aid to the Palestinians. And all that foreign aid went into that lavish tunnels. None of it got to the people. So what are we doing, even doing over there? Israel is a little beacon of democracy in a non-democratic area. So we have some interest in supporting them, but up to a point, and we will. But if the war in Gaza continues for a year or 2 years, we're going to back out also. And we backed out of Afghanistan, and kind of unfair to the soldiers who fought there. And we backed out of Vietnam, unfair to the soldiers, and even North Korea. We didn't fight those wars to win. We did it's called realpolitik. Henry Kissinger, just keep the status quo. Just don't let communism go too far, or don't let Arab terrorism go too far. That's not a real plan. That's just real. It's called realpolitik. Don't get hung up in ideology. But America is about ideology. It's about our Constitution and democracy, and we can't just move forward from something so great. That's realpolitik. That's pragmatic. Obama said once in a debate with John McCain, I think his name was, 2008, I hate ideologues, left and right. I'm a pragmatic person. I will get things done. That's not ideology. That's not sticking up for the Constitution. It's all wrong.
Yeah. Well, a few minutes ago, and earlier in this conversation, we're talking about, again, let's remember how this nation was founded. And again, in my work as a journalist, I often think about, well, the events of the day, and there's no historical context there. But I love that quality about your books, that it provides that historical context. And so take us back even further. I mean, where are those ideas that founding fathers, you mentioned what George Washington had said about foreign entanglements and so on. Where did those ideas come from, that really set democracy in motion?
Well, the first democracy was at the birth of Western civilization. That was 5th century Athens. And it was, everybody voted on everything. It was a direct democracy. It fell apart because Athens got so big and so successful. Everybody was moving there, and they couldn't do it as a direct democracy, and it got into the hands of demagogues. But that was one of the great periods in human history. Everything about us, every building and concept in literature and philosophy and architecture and science, mathematics, everything was almost invented in Greece in 5th century. That's an amazing period. Government wasn't their strength, but 1st century Rome, Cicero figured out what's called the bicameral legislature, what we have in this country. They perfected between those two periods. An 18th century age of enlightenment. The government is to protect social, political, and economic freedom. They put that together into a one-page document. That's fine. And we just lost our nerve. We lost our nerve. We all of a sudden we reversed it, and government is going to be in charge of everything. It's going to pay for everything. And I put the Colosseum, I titled my book Rome 476. The book is not about Rome 476, but what my book is about, mismanagement of government. Because I asked the question at the beginning, a little introduction, why did Rome fall? And Western civilization. Western civilization is that human beings individually have rights. No government, no elders in the village. Nobody has a right to tell anybody what to do, as it is in all other species in nature. That's almost an evolutionary step forward for mankind. Nobody can tell anybody else what to do, and anybody can do whatever they want as long as you don't hurt somebody else. And that's all. We have laws against fraud and against harm. So Rome fell. That's why it's on there, because the Huns came in and with sledgehammers and sledgehammered Rome to smithereens. Just imagine Washington, D.C. They knocked down the Lincoln Memorial, the Washington Obelisk. They knocked down the Supreme Court. They knocked down the Congress. They knocked down the White House into dust. And the U.S. with a large military wouldn't let that happen normally. And Rome with the largest military in Europe at the time, they wouldn't let that happen. What happened is my question. That they sat there on their swords. They didn't lift a muscle. Go ahead, knock it. Destroy the most beautiful thing we've had for thousands of years. And why? Because the soldiers hadn't been paid, probably for a long time.
Yeah, very powerful. No, I mean,
Rome had huge tax revenue, and they didn't. All money that was collected paid interest on the debt. And that's my message for America. We're getting close to having all tax revenue pay interest, no money for anything. That's how sloppy we are. That's my warning to the nation.
Well, it's a powerful note, powerful note. This is a San Francisco Conservative. I'm Tom Martin, and my co-host is author David Parker. We will continue. This is a San Francisco Conservative. I'm Tom Martin, longtime journalist, and I'm joined by my co-host, author David Parker from San Francisco. We were just talking about how basically healthcare insurance in America has gotten way out of hand. David was saying it should be $100, $200 a month, and instead it's exorbitantly expensive, as we all know. Kind of continuing with that, it really makes us question the effectiveness of Congress. We were talking about when our founding fathers constructed this brilliant creation, democracy, they were inspired by these brilliant chapters of history. And I was just wondering, do you think our current Congress really reflects that level of intellectual prowess?
Where it fell apart was 1933. Franklin Roosevelt says, we're going to move forward with progressivism, and we're going to reverse what the founding fathers gave us, which is freedom from government. You're on your own. It's what de Tocqueville in Democracy in America said was so great about our country. He'd never seen it anywhere in the world. We're about to become the greatest country in the world. Citizens are so responsible for their own lives. And nowhere else in the world do people think in those terms. All of a sudden, in 1933, we have freedom with government. Franklin Roosevelt campaigned in 1932. Government is going to end the Depression, and we're going to put people to work, and we're going to provide everything you ever wanted for you. And some people are still, well, they should be, are furious because now we can't reverse it. And they're furious also because depressions last usually 4 years at the most. Recessions 1 to 2 years. The crash of October 28, depression started in 29, 30, 31, 32, a real depression. In 33, at the beginning, it was over. You can look at the graphs. The graphs went back up again. We're back at normal. And Roosevelt did his whole 1 year of campaigning in 32, what he's going to do and how we're going to come. Going modern, science and leadership and the elite running the country. And he just he ignored it. And so instead of the Depression being over, everything government did reversed it. The Depression got worse right away after all his programs. The unemployment racked up close to 25% and stayed there until World War II. If you want to borrow more money than the nation will ever earn to fight a war, yeah, that'll get you out of a depression, but we can't do that now. We're not about to take over the world, and so we need everybody working for the military and everybody drafted. That's not happening, so we can't get out of it. And they expanded to Medicare, war on poverty, expanded to the Affordable Care Act. It's going to expand until we have universal health insurance, universal pension, universal education, universal housing, universal automobiles, universal internet for everyone, universal everything. That's called socialism, and people are beginning to figure it out.
Well, don't you think if Joe Biden is reelected, he will tax the rich, and then we can really finally pay for all those programs?
That is the line for Democrats. tax the rich, and without realizing that you can't tax the rich. That's why it's not, one reason it's not working, because the rich know you're coming. We all read Robin Hood when we were younger. We know you're coming, so we prepare. Rich generally have income producing assets, and they just refinance them. They pull money out until all those assets show no income or even negative income.
Yeah, well, certainly you have a lot of very wealthy
Nothing to
corporations
tax.
there. You're there in the Silicon Valley. You have corporations like Apple. They have deep pockets. I mean, don't you really think we could get those taxes if we set our minds to it?
Well, you're leading me on, Tom. The
I would
Apple
never do that.
Apple has a space station in Cupertino, California. It's beautiful. And everybody thinks that's its headquarters. It looks like its headquarters. Apple is headquartered in Ireland, where tax is 15%. California taxes 15% practically, plus federal tax. And all their money, at least 200 billion, is probably more, is on Jersey Island, a tax haven in the English Channel near Ireland. Every big company knows that politicians are running on taxing the rich because and they'll get reelected. That's what they say, to get reelected, and it doesn't happen. And Democrats also say we should spend money on the problems that are facing the nation. We are a rich nation. It's unconscionable that a nation as rich as we are have a poverty rate of 15%. Lyndon Johnson said that in 1964. Yeah, it is unconscionable, but he started the war on poverty, and they have spent 4 times, or at least 3 times, the amount of all wars this nation ever fought to fight the war on poverty.
Was it successful?
Nothing to show. The needle never moved. On average, a little bit like that. It didn't move. It's 15% today. It was all the way through. Complete waste of money. Medicare is thrown in there, and Social Security payments are very high. That we offer to people, figured about an 8% return. There's no 8% return on anything. So all our services are paid for by borrowing. We're a complete banana republic.
Well, some congressmen and congresswomen would probably say on some issues, we really need to do what they say is the right thing. I mean, right now, there's conflict in Israel and Hamas. There's, Israel in the Gaza Strip, and also what's still going on in Ukraine. And when I want to touch on a topic in a minute about, again, the proper role of the United States. But for now, let's say this is a San Francisco conservative. I'm Tom Martin, along with my co-host, author David Parker, and we will touch on that topic in a moment.
In the heart of the vibrant city by the bay, meet a voice that's challenging the status quo. David Parker, author of A San Francisco Conservative and Rome 476. David Parker, a true San Franciscan with a conservative vision for the future, is a voice that resonates with our nation's founding fathers. Freedom from government, not with government. For 40 years, he taught in San Francisco's inner city schools, acquired a large real estate portfolio, and worked as a professional musician. The Dave Parker Sextet performs every week. It's time for a fresh perspective, one that values fiscal responsibility, individual responsibility. David Parker is not only an academic, his thumb is on the pulse of the economy. He brings real solutions to all the problems affecting our nation. Learn more at davidparkeressays.com and get a free chapter to any of his books, A San Francisco Conservative, Rome 476, and Income and Wealth. That's davidparkeressays.com.
This is a San Francisco conservative. I'm Tom Martin, longtime journalist. My co-host is author David Parker, joining us from San Francisco. And David, you were just talking about, again, why you titled your latest book of essays Rome 476, and talked about that exorbitant debt, which led the army in Rome to do nothing when the invaders, the Huns, came in. And I love that quality of kind of evoking powerful lessons from history that if we don't know them, there can be some pretty serious consequences. What else should we know about your books as we end our conversation today?
Well, I praise 5th century Athens and 1st century Rome, because as a level of civilization that's much, much higher than we are today, and nobody wants to think in those terms. Nobody does think in those terms. Read Aristotle and Plato and Socrates, and read Cicero and Thucydides. Read those guys, and your jaw will drop open, because they sound like us, and they're talking about the same thing. They are us. Read Pericles' funeral oration in Thucydides. It's what the founding father says. Yes, that's what we want for our American government. It's on a so much higher level. It might give us inspiration to solve our problems correctly and to realize our problems are not new. Right there, just realizing that.
Yeah, a very powerful lesson. Again, you'll get the impact of all this in David's books, Income and Wealth, The San Francisco Conservative, and Rome 476. And we look forward to our next conversation.
I'll be there.
This is Tom Martin. Be sure to check out davidparkeressays.com. There's news and information about David's books. You can download a free chapter and much more. And David will answer your questions. Keep in touch with a San Francisco conservative, helping to point America to what the founding fathers wanted for this great country. That's davidparkeressays.com. davidparkeressays.com. And be sure to tune in to our next episode of A San Francisco Conservative.
In the heart of the vibrant city by the bay, meet a voice that's challenging the status quo. David Parker, author of A San Francisco Conservative and Rome 476. David Parker, a true San Franciscan with a conservative vision for the future, is a voice that resonates with our nation's founding fathers. Freedom from government, not with government. For 40 years, he taught in San Francisco's inner city schools, acquired a large real estate portfolio, and worked as a professional musician. The Dave Parker Sextet performs every week. It's time for a fresh perspective, one that values fiscal responsibility, individual responsibility. David Parker is not only an academic, his thumb is on the pulse of the economy. He brings real solutions to all the problems affecting our nation. Learn more at davidparkeressays.com and get a free chapter to any of his books, A San Francisco Conservative, Rome 476, and Income and Wealth. That's davidparkeressays.com.
This is Tom Martin. Be sure to check out davidparkeressays.com. There's news and information about David's books. You can download a free chapter and much more. And David will answer your questions. Keep in touch with a San Francisco conservative, helping to point America to what the founding fathers wanted for this great country. That's davidparkeressays.com. davidparkeressays.com. And be sure to tune in to our next episode of A San Francisco Conservative.